We are starting 5 minutes later because we don't want to drag you, right, on this Sunday, but it's got to do with the marathon and some difficulties in getting into the hotel. So, I want to go over what happened yesterday night, right? You know, I always kind of summarize the different presentations. Well, there was a moment that the ISAP staff had to leave. I mean, because we were very tired. And these two schools kept on dancing and dancing. One of us, in a very collaborative way, told them, would you like to dance in a kind of circle, right, to these two schools? And they said, no, we are competing. We are competing and we want to win the dancing floor prize, right? So congratulations, Michael Ham and St. Hilda's, because we didn't get to know the end of the story, right? Also, we want to thank BDS and our chair, right, Stephen Page, for opening the dancing yesterday night. And the following schools, Florida Day School, Barker. If I don't mention you, you just let me know. I forgot to mention Mendoza, right, a province, and Los Olivos, right, who have attended the conference. I wonder with the St. Andrews, were you dancing? Yes? Okay, good. The ISAP facilitators, it was so nice to see, right, Claudia Ferradas and Leah Gordon and others shaking their hips. Very interesting. But the stars of the night were the group from Patagonia. So congratulations, Sunrise School, Del Solar, and Woodville, right? Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And least, but not all, great to see the speakers, right? Mr. Sugata, we need to know those right movements, right, that were very impressive, right? And Will Richardson and wife and Hamish, right? And I wonder whether Tristan Stovey from the University of Cambridge danced. I couldn't see that, right? But thank you so much for, the spirit. At this moment, you're going to see that we have projected, right, an image from the British Embassy. So something is going to be taking place in the last week of December and September, thank you, September. So we are going to ask, right, the representative from the British Embassy to let us know what this image is about. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much to ISARP for giving us this space to share this activity with you. As you can see, this is an image that is part of the Great Campaign. The Great Campaign is a campaign run by the British government in order to promote the sectors where Great Britain has made a global difference. And for sure, English is one of those, and because English is one of the main assets that the UK, Great Britain, has. As part of the embassy, we are involving in the Great Campaign with different activities, and the English Week, which is one of the main ones, will take place from September 23rd to September 27th. And we have organized a series of activities with schools, with universities, with ISARP, with all of those who have wanted to join us. We have shared the calendar with all the activities through the ISARP database, and thank you very much to ISARP for sharing that with you. And it will also leave some of these in the Cambridge stand, so you can see what of the activities are. If you are still interested to join us, there is an email, that is my email account, and you can contact me and I can explain you better how you can participate. And there are plenty of activities, and some of them will take place at the British residence. One of those is a competition organized by the English-speaking union, and you from schools are very welcome to join. This will be a replay of previous speeches that the ESU has organized, and it's an opportunity for you to learn about this activity and to engage with that by showing your students and your trainers how this works. And we hope that it will be a great success and that we can replicate that next year. If you have any questions, I'm here.
All right, thanks. Good morning. So for those of you that weren't there last night, there was a new dance invented. It's called the Mitra. And I was thinking last night, it kind of reminds me of education. It's a little slow to move, you know, it's a little herky-jerky, starts and stops. It was really fun last night. And, you know, it's the kind of a comment of the moment in which we live that I was up there dancing thinking, okay, Facebook, Twitter, you know, social media going, oh, no, like this. So anyway, I don't know if anybody posted any of that stuff, but if you did, please let me know so I can manage my reputation. So we're going to spend a little time this morning talking about old school to bold school. And I'm going to get you to work a little bit. I think you're probably tired of hearing people speaking at you, so I'm going to do a little bit of that, but I'm going to try to make this a little bit more interactive. This picture, by the way, comes from a visit that I made to a school in San Diego called High Tech High. And are we okay? Good? Okay. High Tech High. And it's a place that I think has become what I would like to call a bold school, meaning it has taken some steps to become very different rather than simply better. It's a beautiful place where the kids create all sorts of things. They basically design the space. They are constantly making things that have real purpose in the world, and it's a beautiful place to go. If you're ever in San Diego and you want to make a visit to a school, it's a great place to go. I'm going to invite you again, those of you that have technology, to open it up and go online. This time I've put up a little bit of a Google Doc. I'm not sure if that's going to work. Whoa. Now we seem to be frozen here. Hold on. I don't know exactly what happened there, but the technology's not working. Hold on. There we go. So at that address at the bottom, bit.ly, and then /ESSARP13, how many of you have used Google Docs? Okay, so many of you know this. So if you haven't, this is another tool that you can use to do some collaborative work. It's a document that is open for anyone to edit, and so as you listen today or as you go through, and you can use this in later sessions if you want, doesn't matter, but you can add your notes here, you can add your links. It's kind of like if everybody was contributing to a notebook at the same time. Instead of we have 200 people taking individual notes, this is one way where all of us can take the same notes. So we can kind of add our own links and add our own stuff there, and it's kind of a collaborative space. So it's just at bit.ly/ESSARP13. And anybody in there yet? Is it working? You can type in there and edit. Just try typing and making sure you can add to it. Okay. So just, if you want to use that again, if you want to use that as a place to take some notes, that's great. If not, that's okay as well. And that site, by the way, will be there as long as Google is in business, which I think will probably be at least a couple more weeks. So you can go back and you can look at that, and you can add to that and whatever else. So, yesterday I talked a lot about this idea that schools need to be really different, not just better. And to me, the biggest, and I think I mentioned that in one of my sessions too, to me, the biggest piece of this in moving a school from an old school to a bold school is vision. It's about how do you see teaching and learning taking place in classrooms? What does it look like? If you were to draw it, if you were to sketch it out, if you were to describe it with words, whatever, what would it look like? We pretty much can make I think all of us can create a picture of the old school, what that looks like, which is pretty much what we're doing right now. But what does a bold school look like? And by that I mean, what is different about what happens in classrooms? So I want to invite you to spend a minute or so just kind of talking about that vision. I'm going to show you one. I know this is a lot, and you don't have to read this, obviously, but this is Esme Capp, who is a primary school teacher in Princess Hill, right outside of Melbourne in Australia. And she probably has one of the, I think, most bold visions for what happens in classrooms, not just with technology, but with the ways in which she thinks about how learning takes place with kids. That it is very authentic, it is child-driven, It's around passion. And I'll just give you a snip here of what she writes in this kind of document online. But children as participants in the 21st century need to understand themselves as learners. And they need to learn to work collaboratively, engage in new technologies, learn how to access new skills and knowledge, and develop the skills of thinking creatively, laterally, and critically. Now, the emphasis of what Esme does in her school, however, is she basically gives kids ownership over their own learning. And she was in a school a few years ago where they had to make an addition onto the school because they were growing. And she turned the entire project over to kids. She just said, we have to build an addition. What do you think it should be? And kids went and they did all the research. They connected with architects. They picked out the colors for the furniture, and they made presentations as to why the furniture should be particular color and particular size and everything else. She just totally engaged them in a real-world project that they had a vested interest in, and she just turned them loose. And in the process of doing that, not only did she get a whole bunch of engaged kids, but she also created a beautiful space for her school. I visited it a few years ago, and it's just an amazing thing. You walk into it, and you can tell it's kid-friendly space, with all sorts of places where kids can just study and collaborate and do all sorts of cool things. So, at any rate, my point here is that what we do in classrooms has to be driven by a vision. It has to be, the decisions that we make in schools should be driven by a vision. Every decision we make about budget, about technology, about curriculum, about the people we hire, should fit the vision that we have for what teaching and learning looks like in the classroom. And if we're talking here, this weekend about changing that vision, well, what is it? What does it look like? And that's what I'm going to spend some time on. But first, I want you to talk a little bit with one another about what does change. What is that kind of different vision that you see for a classroom that has abundant access to teachers and people and information and content? So take a couple minutes. I know it's early in the morning, but we're going to get your brains going here. Take a couple minutes and talk to one another. What changes? What do you see differently in that classroom? Go ahead.
I'm turning to San Diego in January. What's the name of the school in San Diego?
In High Tech High.
High Tech High.
High Tech High School, yeah. Okay. If you could bring those conversations to a close. I know 2 minutes is more than enough time to create a vision for your classroom. I know, it's just easy to do, I know. So, what'd you talk about? What came up? What were some things that you saw or that you wanted to see in that classroom, in that bold school that you're thinking about? Anything of interest? I love wait time, by the way. I can stand here forever and wait. Yes, ma'am. Say again? Okay, so different use of space. So the classrooms look differently because of the way you've laid them out. Okay, what else? Yep. Yep. Okay, so changing the furniture to make it more flexible and more maybe student-centered. What else? Any of you talk about the roles of the teacher, your roles in the classroom? I thought so, maybe. What about that? Yep. Yeah, a teacher that's more of a guide as students take more ownership over their own learning. So maybe in that vision, kids are really driving the questions. What else? Yeah. Okay, so having the space to interact with kids and really kind of be there with them rather than up here and down there like we're doing right now. Yeah, what else? Yep. So the role of the student is more active. In what way? So what do you see kids doing? I mean... Yep. Yeah, sometimes we do the thinking for them, right? Because it's easier that way. If we want them to get there, that's one way we can do that. But okay, yep, one more. Yeah, more than one thing going on at the same time. Probably in that vision of a more bold classroom, you're going to have to like chaos a little bit more, and not knowing what's going to happen next. Yep. Teachers have to be technology capable. Yeah. Yeah, and if you didn't hear, teacher training is critical, and I'm gonna put my spin on that and say teacher self-training is important, right? That it's our job now, like I said yesterday, to get ourselves up to speed and to figure out some of these technologies. And I just want to point out too, if I didn't say it yesterday, and apologies if I did, but we look at kids to help us with technology because they know a lot about how things work and they're not afraid to break things with technology. They'll just try doing stuff with it. But at the end of the day, we still have to be the people that help them learn with technology. That's the most important piece. That's why they look to us. We need to model that and be able to use it. But you're absolutely right. In a bold classroom, the technology has to work, and we have to know what that means and how to troubleshoot it perhaps a little bit, but certainly how to make that technology really fly if it does work. All right, so, and I mean, seriously, these are the types of conversations, though, that I hope you take back with you. I hope you spend more than 2 minutes talking about vision in the classroom at some point, that you really sit down and sketch it out. A lot of the groups that I work with, we literally draw what classrooms look like, literally. And even people who don't have a lot of artistic talent, like myself, even the sketches that you draw, they say a lot about how you see that environment changing, how you see that culture in the classroom changing. And it really has to be driven by this idea that, how do things change when we have abundance in our lives, when we have all these connections that we can begin to use. So I'm going to give you a bit of a vision of what I think a bold school looks like, but I want to make this really clear. It's not your vision. This is my vision. And I'm not saying that your vision has to be this one, but this is just something that I've kind of developed over the last few years in going to a lot of schools, talking to a lot of people, and trying to come up with, well, what are the ingredients for what I would call a bold school? And by the way, I just want to tell you, I wanted to write a book called From Old School to Bold School, and it was going to be a book about all these traditional schools that had made this transition into these new types of schools that really were taking advantage of abundance and connections and giving kids license to learn and empowering them and whatever else. And I didn't write the book because I couldn't find enough schools that had made the transition. This is really hard. This is really, really difficult. And it's not something that happens overnight. This is 7-8 year process, 10-year process. But it starts with vision. It starts with where do we want to get to? And if you can kind of get to the point where you can articulate that vision in some clear way for you, then you can start making those decisions. You can start thinking about professional development. You can start thinking about technology and curriculum. Most of the money that we spend in the United States on technology is wasted because there's no vision that purchase is built on. It's just the parents want my kids to have iPads, so we're buying iPads. And that's not a great reason to buy iPads, So anyway, so I'm going to give you 9 things, 9 kind of qualities of bold schools. And I'm going to go through these pretty briefly just to give you a taste, but I think they're pretty self-explanatory. They're not difficult, but I think that at least they'll give you some framework as to what this looks like. The first one, and the most important one, is that schools that are bold are learner-centered. They're not teacher-centered. And most of the schools that I go into are teacher-centered. Basically, the focal point of the classroom is the teacher. It's not about what kids are doing so much. It's about what we want them to do, all the things we talked about yesterday. So bold schools really do give a lot of license or give a lot of power over learning to the kids. And it is about kids self-organizing and getting into the learning around their own passions. Now, I understand that there are lots of things that the ministry wants to make sure that your kids learn. And so the question becomes, well, how do you serve both of these masters? How do you make sure that the ministry is happy, but how do you then empower kids to learn on their own? And this is hard. It's a very different dance that you have to do. I'll give you one example of what this looks like. And I love this quote, by the way, by Einstein, who said, I just make the conditions. I just create the conditions for learning to take place. I mean, that's really what our job is. Can we create the environment? Can we create the culture and the conditions for learning to take place in our classrooms? So one way you can do this is to use Minecraft. Now, this was a classroom in Massachusetts where they were studying United States history. But what the teacher said was, basically, how do you want to approach this discussion of history? And there were a group of kids that said, well, what if we recreated history in Minecraft? And basically that's what they began to do. And again, if you're not familiar with Minecraft, it's like this Lego world environment where it's very easy to create things and collaborate in these spaces. So what you're looking at here is kind of a iteration of colonial America in Minecraft that these kids had created. And they created stories about history that they then acted out within the Minecraft environment. Now, they're learning history. They're making the state happy because they're getting the stuff that they need in order to do well on the assessment. But they're also engaged because they're creating history in a little bit of a different way. Now, this is just a really small example of what we're talking about here. But it is saying to children, you have the ability to approach this particular content in whatever way you like, and to find a way to do that. Now, one of the difficulties is when you walk into classrooms and you say, this is what we need to learn, how do you want to learn it? Many kids will say, oh, no, that's your job. You're supposed to teach me how to learn this stuff. I don't want to do it on my own. So one of the things we have to do sometimes is let kids flounder a little bit and let kids be uncomfortable as they get out of that habit of being told what's going to happen next. So it's messy and it's somewhat uncomfortable at the beginning. But once kids understand that they really do have the ability to approach the content or approach the stuff that we want them to learn in their own way, it becomes a very, very different place. So one of the things that we can do is maybe pick one outcome, and Guy was talking a lot about this yesterday. Pick one thing in your curriculum that you can just give to kids and say, this is what the standard is, or this is what we have to learn. How do you want to get there? How do you want to show that you've understood that? How do you want to learn that on your own and then show that you've mastered it? So learner-centered classrooms are absolutely the most important piece of this. The second part of it, though, is that inquiry, especially in a world of abundance, questions are more important than answers in a world of abundance, right? Because answers are everywhere. So our focus is, how do we get kids to ask really good questions? And how do we help them pursue the questions that they are interested in? So I'll give you a quick story what this looks like at one school up in the States. This is a high school in Indiana. And one day the chemistry teacher was talking about his friend in Haiti, who was a headmaster of a private school in Haiti. And this was right in between, about 5 years ago, the hurricanes that hit Haiti and devastated the country. And he said that one of the problems they were having in Haiti was they couldn't get clean drinking water to a lot of the kids in a lot of the schools because all the wells had been contaminated. There were cholera outbreaks that were going on. And he was just kind of telling the story, and this one girl in the classroom raised her hand, and she said, well, you know, we do all these chemistry experiments in these chemistry labs. Why can't we figure out a way of getting them clean drinking water? And to his credit, he said, that's a really great question. Why don't we do that? And they did. They took 1 day a week for the entire year to work on this project of how do we get clean drinking water? Can we come up with a system that the kids in Haiti can use to get clean drinking water? And so not every child wanted to work on, you know, the manufacture of this or do a lot of the research. Some kids wanted to do marketing. Some of the kids said, hey, you know what, if we're going to do this, why don't we raise awareness in our community? Why don't we educate people as to drinking water issues around the world? And so they all kind of took different roles within this, and it's not every child doing the same thing. It's every child doing something different, having some piece of ownership over the whole process. They collected, they had fundraising, they sold candy. The entire school actually became a part of this. Kids in kindergarten were learning Haitian songs, and kids in third grade were cooking Haitian food. And it just became this really big thing that lasted over 1.5 years, actually, as they went through this process. But at the end of it, the very cool thing was they created 5 systems. They literally manufactured 5 systems that then a group of kids and a group of teachers took to Haiti and installed in villages in Haiti. And the kind of funny, well, I don't know if it's funny, but the 5th one that they were going to install was in a part of the village that was being ravaged by cholera and all sorts of disease. And so the kids didn't go. The teachers actually went and installed that one. They were kind of the sacrificial, you know, going up there and making sure it was okay. But how cool is that, right? That's the type of work that kids can do if they have an interest and a real kind of question that they want to answer. And it ties into, oh, by the way, they passed the test. And Guy was talking about this yesterday too, you know, that there's a little bit of a leap of faith that's involved here, but basically when kids do real work, when kids are answering important questions, they're learning the stuff that they need to learn along the way as well. But, you know, it is about this idea of discovery. Ask questions. We should be asking questions every day in our classrooms that we don't know the answers to. And they should be questions that are generated by kids more often than not. We should always try to pursue the things that they have an interest or a passion in pursuing. Now, it also ties into this other idea, though, and this is the third one, that bold schools really focus on doing authentic work. And one of the kind of sad stories of my kids' primary school experience was that they used to come home every Friday with this thing that we call in the States the Friday folder. I don't know if you've heard of the Friday folder. But the Friday folder was filled with every piece of paper that my kids did in that week, whether it was worksheets, homework assignments, tests, quizzes, projects, whatever else. And they used to literally come home with dozens of pieces of paper every week. And when they were in 3rd and 5th year, my wife and I started saving every piece of paper that they came home with. And at the end of the year, we had a stack in our bedroom of 2.5 feet high of paper that they had brought home. Now, you can guess how many times they went and looked at any of that paper, can't you? They never did. They never did. And they had no investment in any of that work. That was we called it the doing school pile, right? because they were just doing school. They were doing the things that people, that the teachers had assigned to them. They were bringing it home, and they were just, I don't know why it actually was coming home in the Friday folder. We had to sign the Friday folder every week to acknowledge that we'd received all this paper. But they did hours worth of work that they really, at the end, didn't care about. It wasn't authentic. It didn't have a purpose in the world. It didn't have real meaning in the world. And there's no reason now why our kids can't create real work for real purposes for real audiences. They can write books and publish them themselves online. They can create all sorts. Just wait till you get a 3D printer and think of the things that kids can actually create and put out there in the world. They can collaborate with others to, as those kids I showed you yesterday, to stop bullying, to come up with all sorts of technologies that can make life easier or solve problems that they have. What I'm going to suggest is that, whether you have technology or not, you can ask kids to do real work for real purposes. At High Tech High, one of the best things they do every year is they publish a book that their kids write, and it's a science book, actually. It looks at the wetlands around San Diego from an environmental standpoint. Kids go out and do the research and everything else, and they put together this beautiful book that they then sell online and they sell locally as well. So they're authors, and they're creating something that lives in the world. I think for bold schools, that's really important, and it's something that we should really focus on. Can you take half of the paper? Can you take a quarter of the paper, that type of back and forth work that you do with kids, and change it into something where the end result is not simply giving it to you so you can assess it, but that it goes out into the world and it does something meaningful in the world. I think that that's a really important piece of this. Now, I just want to make sure, too, that I say this, that student-centered, inquiry-based, authentic classroom doesn't require technology, by the way. That's not something that you have to wait to be connected to do. You can do that right away. You can start giving kids authentic purposes for the work that they do, having them ask big questions and letting them drive their own learning. You can do that pretty easily. You don't need to wait for any technology. But these next two are basically suggesting that we do need to make sure that at some point technology is a part of this. My kids and your kids are going to live in a digital world, whether we like it or not. And it's interesting to see how many of you have your digital devices right now, taking pictures of what's up there on the screen. That's the world that they're going to be in. And if you were in my literacy session yesterday, you probably walked out of here understanding that technology is just going to be a fundamental part of the way that they interact with the world, the way that they create in the world. And so basically it is about having fluency with technology. Now, from a budgetary standpoint, the prices of technology are coming down pretty quickly. They've been, and Sugata can probably say more about this than I can, but I know that they've been piloting these devices in India, and they've had some mixed success from what I understand. But the larger point is that the price of these devices is going to come down fairly quickly. There are sites online now where you can find tablets for $50 US, and it's just the point that budget in the States, at least, people say, well, we can't afford it. And now I think we're getting to the point where we can say we can't afford not to any longer. We can't afford to not find ways to bring that into our schools. So schools need to be digital. And here's one thing. Any of you at a one-to-one school where every child gets a device from the school? Okay, so any of you talking about that? All right, a couple people are. That is a big conversation in the States right now. It is, how do we get devices into kids' hands? But here's the thing. Let me give you a piece of advice. If you create a vision for learning in your schools, and you decide that an iPad, let's say an iPad is the tool that you choose, please make sure that the teachers get the iPad at least a year before the kids get the iPads. One of the things that always amazes me is when schools decide to buy all this technology and they hand it out to teachers and students on the same day, and they say, "Here, good luck." You need to be fluent. You need to be fluent with the technology, just like just the question that came up before. You need to be fluent with the technology so that your kids, when they get that device, you really know how to leverage that device. At my old school, actually, teachers got laptops 2 years before kids. And by the time the kids started getting them, those teachers knew exactly what was going on with the technology. They were very comfortable with it and just became a part of their practice. Now, it's not enough, however, just to be digital, because just to be digital means, okay, so now every child has a device, and we're just creating PowerPoints, or we're just creating worksheets on Word, or we're just using it for local kind of traditional uses that don't transform or don't change anything. So, as we were talking about yesterday, and again, as we've been talking about the whole weekend, it is then about being connected. It's not simply having the device. It's like, okay, now how do you get outside of your walls? And apologies again if I used this metaphor yesterday, but one of my favorites is, if you have connected devices, the walls of your classroom suddenly become really thin, if you know what I mean. And the idea now is, how do you get outside? How do you burst through those classrooms as much as you possibly can? How do you begin to connect your kids to other people, to other experts, to other classrooms, to other teachers in ways that allow them to learn even more broadly or more widely than you can use in your classroom? I'll just remind you again that networks are the new classrooms. That it is this idea that you are simply a node, one little point on the map now. That's where your classroom exists. It's not, if your kids have connected devices, you're just one small little dot. And by the way, at that point, you aren't the smartest people in the room any longer. I hope you understand that, right? And you shouldn't be, nor should you be. One of my favorite stories from my work was, we read a book, I don't know if you've heard of it down here, it was called The Secret Life of Bees, and it was by a woman named Sue Monk Kidd. And as my kids were reading that, on the blog that we had created for them to talk about that, Sue Monk Kidd was actually in the blog with them, answering their questions and giving them all sorts of information. And I was definitely not the smartest person in that room in terms of that particular book. And that's a good thing, right? It's a good thing that we can reach out and find people who have more expertise, more experience than we do to help our kids learn. So it is about being connected and thinking about classrooms with thin walls. How do we get out, and how do we find those people? And by the way, a lot of those connections that you find for your kids start with the connections that you have for yourselves. I see on Twitter almost every day people saying, I'm looking for a classroom that we can study Shakespeare together, or whatever. And people just kind of fall out from Twitter and make connections and start collaborating around the things that they're doing in their curriculum. So yesterday in my other session, I don't know how many of you were here, but we talked about literacy as well. And I want to show these bullet points from the National Council of Teachers of English, because bold schools are literate, and they're literate in a modern sense. They're literate in the sense that everybody has proficiency with the tools of technology, that everyone basically they can build relationships with others to answer questions collaboratively and cross-culturally, that they can design and share information for global communities. I mean, think about that. That literacy, and this is, again, the National Council of Teachers of English in the States, that says if you can't design and share information for global audiences, that you are illiterate if you can't do that. And that's a pretty big statement to make, that you can manage, analyze, synthesize multiple streams of simultaneous information, which we don't even know what that means, I know. So the multimedia piece and the ethical piece. It's one thing to be digital, it's another thing to be connected, but then it's another thing to be literate within that connected space. Does that make sense? And we have to bring that type of understanding and that type of practice to the environments that we create, otherwise we're really not becoming bold. We're just kind of playing with old, right? We're kind of adding technology onto old, but not really changing very much. So it requires our understanding of literacy to really move forward and to change as well. So literacy work in the context of that list, or whatever other list that works, should be a part of our professional development. It should be a part of each one of us every year should have goals around how can we become more literate in the context of the modern world in which we're learning. Now, the last three are a little bit, I don't know what the word is, but they're not as concrete, I don't think. But I think that bold schools are transparent. And I'm going to give you a story, and I hope the heads who were at the dinner the other night don't mind me saying this, but I gave a presentation to about 30 heads with the organization on Friday night, and at one point I asked, how many of you know what's happening in the other schools that are represented in this room in terms of the good work that teachers are doing? And very few hands went up. There isn't very much that we share that other people can see and really model after. And I think that one of the really interesting affordances of the web, one of the really interesting opportunities of the web, is that we can begin to share our practice in transparent ways that can inform others. And you know, I want to be able to find you and to learn from you and to see your best practices in your classroom, because it makes me a better teacher. But if you're not being transparent, if you're not sharing that practice in some way, I can't learn from you. That's the wonderful thing about the web. You know, I'm thousands of miles away, but I can learn from you if you share, if you participate. If you don't participate, it can't happen. So this is Shelley Wright, who is one of my favorite teachers. Her blog is Wright's Room. You can Google her, and again, I'm going to give these slides to Silvana, and she can give you the link to see this. But here's a person who 3 years ago decided, I'm going to change my classroom from an old classroom to a bold classroom. And she literally went through the process of moving toward a very student-centered, inquiry-based, authentic classroom where her kids were doing real work, they were connected, all the things that I've been talking about. She's like the poster child for the type of classroom that I'm talking about. But what was amazing about Shelley was that she blogged every step of the way. Every single day, just about, she blogged about what was happening in her classroom. And it was not long before lots of people were learning from her on a daily basis. This is what I tried. It didn't work. She has a powerful, powerful post where she talks about the sadness that she felt about the idea that, you know, she was a great teacher in the old sense. And now she was doing it in a different way, and she felt kind of sad about giving up that person, you know, that power, not power, but that the way she felt about herself as a teacher, and had to really transition into another place and another way of thinking around that. But this, because of her transparency, because of her willingness to share, there are literally thousands of teachers whose lives have been changed by that. And that's the promise of the web in large measure, but only if you share, only if you're transparent. And I'm going to tell you, one of the easiest ways to start momentum around change is when you see it happening with other people in this room. When you start sharing in ways that you can look and say, oh, she's doing that, or he's doing that, and that's how that works, and that's how we do that. You know what I mean? But right now, my guess is, as with most schools and most organizations, there's just not, you don't know what someone else is doing. You don't know what's going on in classrooms and other schools, and that's a really powerful way of modeling that. So, you know, create online spaces where you just showcase your work. And I know it's, you know, there's a feeling of risk that goes along with that. I know it's difficult for people to put their things online, to participate, but it's important. It's really important that we do that because we can, number one, and also because it just moves the rest of us and educates the rest of us as to what is possible. Bold schools are innovative, and I think that this is sometimes one of the most difficult pieces of this, because we're going to have to take some risks within schools. We're going to have to innovate. We're going to have to try things. Every business that's successful is constantly innovating. They're constantly upscaling. I don't know if you've ever heard of the company Kodak. I'm sure you have. It's not in existence any longer because it really didn't innovate. That was the #1 film and camera company in the United States and in large measure, you know, around the world, and it is no longer around because it didn't innovate. We're going to have to innovate. And that doesn't mean that we innovate, we take the whole system and just do something different with it, but we do innovate in small ways. We try things, we pilot things, we take small groups, we try certain classrooms, whatever else. We try to kind of poke the box. This is one thing that a lot of schools have been doing. Google has what they call the 20% rule, where basically if you work for Google, you get 1 day a week to work on what you want to work on. 4 days a week, you're doing what you're told, basically. But 1 day a week, you get a chance to innovate. You get a chance to come up with a better email. And basically, Gmail was basically developed like that. So a lot of schools now are going to this kind of 1 day a week, can we let kids work on what they want to work on? Can we give them the opportunity to pursue their passions? Can we let them create big projects that they really care about? And it's a little bit of a risk, right? Because you're cutting out 1 day a week from the regular teaching and learning that you've been doing. But it is giving kids at least some opportunity to pursue things deeply that they care about. And, I mean, that's just one type of innovation that's out there, but encourage and celebrate creative practice. I mean, break some rules. Break some small rules. Don't be afraid of trying new things. Certainly you have to have a culture and a community that supports that. But we have to be trying different things. We have to be putting our practice out there a little bit and changing it. And then probably what is the most difficult of all, depending on where you are, is this idea that I think that you have to provoke change as well in the larger context. That it's not so much about simply having the conversations locally or internally, but at some point you have to step out and you have to say, this is not working, and we need to change this in a larger scale. And that's hard. That's really hard. And one of my favorite superintendents, Lisa Brady, she was my former superintendent. I know you can't read this, but on a regular basis, she blogs about the fact that much of what is happening in the system isn't working. She goes out and she engages parents in book readings and book clubs, and she's constantly provoking questions in her community as well, and to her legislators. And she is, I think, pretty brave in doing so, but she understands that we have to make this conversation grow outside of education as well. I really see parents on one side and policymakers or like government officials as the vice grip, if you will, that education's in the middle of. And we're going to have to change these conversations that are happening out here to give us more license to really work in our schools. And that's one way you do it. You just have to be more provocative about it, write blog posts about it, write letters about it. It's interesting in the States right now, there is a group that has really started to push back pretty hard against the reforms that they're attempting to implement in America right now. And it's coming from educators, which is, it's really nice to see, I have to tell you. It's very uplifting that a number of people are saying, no, this is enough testing, it's enough with all this stuff that we're putting kids through, we're not going to do it any longer, we can't do it any longer, we have to change it. So be provocative as much as possible, and educate your parents, educate your community as to what's going on, not only in your classrooms, but in the world, and what that all looks like, and why it's important for them to understand that as well. So I'm curious as to which of these you feel is a little bit more difficult than the rest. So I'm going to give you a minute just to talk and just say, which of these feel really the most difficult? Is it, getting kids to be driving their own learning? Is it the whole digital and connected piece? Is it being transparent? Take a minute and just talk about that, and then we'll see where you're at. Okay. If we could come back together. All right. I know you want to keep talking. All right. Hello. Come on. I'll start dancing. I really hate to cut people off when they're talking, but just in the interest of time. So, which ones kind of stood out? Yep. To reframe the mindset of the parents. Yeah, and you're not alone in that, believe me. I'll give you just a little bit of self-promotion. We have a site called raisingmodernlearners.com, raisingmodernlearners.com, and it's a newsletter for parents. And if you want to take a look at that, and maybe feel free to send that out to your parents. We're trying to get that conversation started. Yes, ma'am. Shh, hold on. Wait. Shh. Number one. How come? Why? Yeah. Yep. And I think Guy was talking a lot about that yesterday too, the roles that teachers have in the classroom, and it's hard. What else? What else do you see as difficult here? Yep. Being provocative? Yeah. Same as back there. Yeah. And yep. No. Yeah, and transparency does require trust. It requires you feeling comfortable putting your work up there and not being afraid of being put down or criticized or whatever. And that's not to say that kind criticism is that's a good thing. I mean, we need to have some pushback, and we need to do that. But yeah, exactly right. You can't be willing to be transparent if you don't feel like you're going to be supported in that. So that's difficult as well. Any others that? Yeah. Which one? Uh-huh. Yep. Well, super awesome Sylvia is a real geek, don't forget. I mean, she's way out there. So she does great stuff. Yeah. Well, but I remember back when I first started teaching, having my journalism students, I remember, I don't know if you know what an offset press is. I don't know if you've ever seen an offset ink press, it was this big thing that used to crank. And I used to stand printing magazines that we handed out to the community, and at least 2 or 3 times a year. So that's not to say that that's easy to do. It's not. But you don't need technology in order to do authentic work. You can still do performances. You can do all sorts of things. But technology makes it a lot easier to do that. Technology brings audience in a way that you can't measure or you can't really compete against when it's just face to face. Yep. Is it? Yeah. 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 And I know there are lots of barriers. I'm going to just mention those briefly because we're running out of time here. But I just wanted to show you that actually you guys are doing some great job on the notes here. Shelley Wright's blog, someone put a link into Shelley's blog, so if you want to go there, there's Raising Modern Learners. So, if you go back to this notebook or this document at some point, you can get a lot of the notes that maybe and a lot of the links that you missed or that you maybe didn't get down. I just want to end with this since we're kind of running out of time. I was going to ask you to talk a little bit about those barriers, and certainly budget is one of those barriers. Time is a barrier. The narratives or the stories that we bring around our own education, those are barriers because it's hard to see something new and different when it comes to education. Leadership is a barrier at times because There may be cross purposes. People in leadership sometimes want to get better, not necessarily different. And that's not to say that they're bad people or they don't care about kids, but that there maybe isn't that vision or there isn't that willingness to have those conversations. So there are many barriers. We spend lots of time in our workshops just talking about, well, why can't we do this? Let's talk about why this can't be done. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we also have to understand that barriers are simply problems to be solved, right? That is, there's almost nothing that can't be solved. The money problem, the budget problem is a real one, but there are schools around the world that are solving that problem. They are finding solutions to find the revenue, find the money that they need in order to bring devices into schools. The leadership issue, is a problem at times, but there are schools that are solving that one as well. So the more that you become connected and the more that you become networked into the larger conversation around change that's happening not just in Argentina but around the world, the better you'll be able to overcome some of the barriers that are very real and that are very difficult at times. But you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to come up with a new answer necessarily to the problem that stands in your way. There are people out there who are solving those problems. So find them and connect to them, and the more you get connected, the more you'll be able to do that. It does start with us at the end of the day, as I said yesterday, and I'm going to end by doing this for you. Hopefully this is a gift that I'm going to give you. Right now, I want you to simply stop worrying about kids. Go ahead, close your eyes. Stop worrying about your kids. Right now. Stop worrying about your schools. Stop worrying about what you're going to do in class tomorrow. Stop worrying about changing what everything looks like. Just stop worrying about it. Okay? Take it off your shoulders right now. Take that weight off your shoulders. Because as educators, I know that's a very difficult thing to ask of you. You care about your kids. You want to do it right for your kids. You want it to be better for your kids. But for now, don't change anything that you do in your schools. Nothing. But change a lot about what you do as learners, right? That's your work, I think. That's your work. It's figuring out how do you become different, and then down the road, 6 months, next year, whatever, then start thinking about your classrooms, and you'll start thinking about them differently. One little exercise that we do, and I'm going to leave you with this, you can do this if you want or not, but I would ask you, if we had the time, to write down, or type in one goal about your own personal learning that you would like to achieve in the next 5 days. What's something that you can do in the next 5 days to change yourselves as learners? And then what's another thing that you think you could accomplish in the next 5 weeks? And then what's another thing you think you could get done in the next 5 months? Make this about your learning. Make this about you becoming more self-organized, more networked, more bold in your own practice. And if you do that, the conversations that you have around change in your own schools will just be so much better, so much powerful, so much more relevant for your kids. I wish you sincere good luck with that work should you choose to do it. And I really want to thank you so much for your time and attention both of these days. You guys have been really, really great. It's been fun to be here. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Will. Well, and let's be bold and have some coffee. 555. See you in half an hour for leadership that supports learning, the CIE presentation.